36 years of basketball knowledge and life skills. Your host, Coach Goins, focuses on today's topics on and off the court, helping players and coaches achieve their goals. So get ready for another fast break episode of Basketball More Than a Game with your host, Coach Goins.
All right, folks, you know what time it is. It is Coach Goins, and it is basketball more than a game. So listen, like we always say, make sure you got your sneakers on, you got them laced up tight, because today, via telephone, you know what? You thought I was getting ready to tell you. But before I do, I got to make sure I pay the bills and so we can stay on the air. But so our title sponsor, we always want to stop and give honor where honor's due. So we certainly appreciate Mr. Curtis Jackson, your independent insurance agent out of the great state of North Carolina and now serving Southern Virginia. So if your insurance needs, please reach out to Mr. Curtis Jackson at 919-614-5796 for his continued support of basketball more than the game. So, you know, you folks, you say, Coach, man, who's popping? You just coming off the 50th podcast episode where you had the NBA Hall of Famer, Ralph Sampson on. You know, I had a center on. So as I was like kind of digging in the archives, I was like, man, you know what? I got to get a point guard. I got to get a guard on this show. So you know what? And lo and behold, you know, I've got on none other than a great, great friend of mine from, you know, back in the day. I actually was kind of doing some figuring up on this stuff. It's 33 years ago that I had the honor and privilege to meet this outstanding gentleman. And that's none other than Mr. Marion Williams, Jr. So, Marion, welcome to Basketball More Than a Game.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Coach.
You know what, folks? You can't ask for a finer human being. This man, I almost say young man. This man now he's originally from Laurinburg, North Carolina, and he played basketball and football and baseball. He's a 1982 graduate of Scotland High School, where he led it in track. And 1988 graduate of the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, where he received a BA degree in political science. I met Marion on that campus. And we just, worked that friendship. And I tell you what, when it came to basketball, there was nobody that could run that point. Had a pull-up jump shot back then, when a lot of times people didn't know what that pull-up jump shot was. But Marion, come on, man, let me hear from you. How you doing? We know what, we're just gonna have a great time and just talk about everything that we can talk about in our time frame. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to you if you just like to introduce yourself, and we'll get rolling.
Well, it's a pleasure again to be with you, Coach, and to be on your show. It's always a pleasure to talk about basketball, because basketball has a lot to do with life, and the things that I've achieved and learned through the game of basketball has served me well in what I do in my profession. I currently work as a state employee with an agency that provides services for people with intellectual disabilities, and in my job I work as a quality assurance specialist, and that's the same thing about being a point guard. Quality assurance of knowing how to run an offense and how to run an efficient defense. And as a point guard back in the day, I had a good understanding of what that entails. The guard is the person who runs the offense. And in running the offense, you have to understand both the strengths and the weaknesses of teammates, whether it be a shooting guard or a forward or center. You have to understand what they can and can't do. And then if things that they need to improve on, you have to know how to motivate them both on and off the court. But I especially love running a fast break, because usually if the team that you're playing against is not used to fast break basketball, you can exploit them on every turn, because you keep them guessing as you go up and down the court. But I pride myself of my quickness, being able to react to a defender or to react in the offensive scheme of knowing how to pull up or when to involve the big man and to draw defense to you so you can get it to the power forward or to the center. It is those basic X's and O's of what a point guard should know makes basketball exciting and make basketball fundamentally sound. A guard has to have, therefore, a high IQ of the game, because it can't be all about scoring. Or the guard has to involve the entire team, and the guard is really like the floor general, if you will. The guard knows what that coach expects out of the team.
That's
and
right.
He's really the mouthpiece of that head coach.
You know what? I couldn't have said it any finer. So, folks, you know what? So here's the deal. Stop asking me why he's on the show, because he just broke it down for you, right? That's what I told you last week. We had the big fella, so we had to reach out and get a guard, and it was such a pleasure. You know, when I think back on it, you know, we never won the championship doing intramurals at when we were at Pembroke State University, but we were always right there in the thick of things, and it was a combination of guys that we came together and built a body of work, and most importantly, as Marion was saying, is what he learned from the game of basketball has really helped him, and we know, and I know he was just awarded, and I'm going to ask him to elaborate on that here in a second. But like you said, he works for the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, and as a unit consultant, and that's an important role because think about what he does. Think about how he takes care of the personnel that he comes in contact with, and as he eloquently said, how does he take care of a team and making sure that you give the big man where he wants the ball, you give the wing guy where he wants to shoot his jump shot. You just can't come down and just throw a pass. And that's a great call out for the young guys that's listening to the show. We want to make sure that you dialing in exactly what Mr. Williams is telling you, is that as a guard, you have it is your duty to make sure that you're running that offense as effective as you can. So listen, before we get into it any further, we want to make sure that you can continue. We want to thank everybody that continues to hit us up and send us emails and ask different questions, and we want to make sure that you're able to check us out on iTunes and Stitcher, Podbean.com, Facebook, Lionfish Entertainment, so you can subscribe, follow us, and leave us a comment. And again, just thank you to everybody from not just the United States. Also, we're in 17 foreign countries, so we appreciate everybody that continues to listen and continues to kick it out. So, hey, Marion, I'm going to kind of getting back to the root of what we're talking about. The first segment of the podcast, I entitled, it's kind of fun that we've been talking about it, is Fast Break. Now, in that, I want to kind of go back to your roots, if you don't mind. If you don't mind, tell the audience, where did Marion, how did the love of the game of basketball, where did it kick in? What age? How did it come about?
For me, I can remember back in the mid-'70s watching the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill play a game, and it was in Carmichael Auditorium.
Watch out
before
now.
the Dean Dome was built.
Watch out.
I saw a point guard run the offense like I've never seen before, and this person was by the name of Phil Ford. And this point guard I consider as the quintessential point guard because he knew how to run an offense. And the thing that intrigued me was that he listened closely to his coach. Obviously, that was Coach Dean Smith. And he was so in tune with his instructions, he was literally exemplifying what Coach wanted him to do on the court. And one of the things that really caught my attention is how Phil Ford would run the fast break and off of a rebound or even off of an inbound pass. He would immediately exploit the opponents who were dragging up court or not running as fast, and how they would execute it from defense to offense. And whenever there is a defensive play by the Tar Heels, they would know how to turn defense into points. And it's those basic fundamentals that wins games. And the coaches that I see today, they gravitate to those same fundamentals. And when I see a guard today grasp onto that, that's usually the type guard that has a team that wins. And so it's essential to know how to run a fast break and how to be the floor general for the coach.
You know what? That's eloquently placed. And it's funny that you brought up the Dean Dome. And I was actually at work this week, and I was telling the guy, I was like, hey, you know what? How cool would it be if Carolina went back and played a game in Carmichael? Whether it would be Duke or whoever, but don't go to the Dean Dome. Go in there, dust the seats off, drop in and play a game in Carmichael Auditorium. Because when you said that, I could see it. I remember back in the day when the Tar Heels would be playing, and down in the left-hand corner of the television, there was whoever it was. They were working. They had a flip chart scoreboard. Even though they had the scoreboard in the middle, they They had a regular scoreboard, but they always had that flip chart. So that's just sharing from the heart, folks. A true point guard, recognizing the true point guard from yesteryear. So now let's fast forward this puppy a little bit. Let's just go on up and jump in. It's 2018. I'm gonna put you on the spot, my friend. Who's the best point guard in college basketball, and who's the best point guard in the NBA? And it's your opinion, so you got the mic.
Wow, you just gave me a loaded question. I have to express a bias.
Okay.
And recognize the point guard for UNC Chapel Hill, Barry.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He understands what is expected of him as a point guard because of the team was not the same as it was last year when they won the national championship. I like his style because he has adapted his style to know when to become the playmaker and when to become the scorer. And he had to learn quickly because of the team not being the same as it was last year. And he's starting to turn the corner in that regard, and now is really beginning to settle in to the multidimensional role that he's playing as a point guard. Now, for the NBA, I would have to go with Kyrie Irving.
Okay.
He, to me, is in a lot of ways, Coach. He's somewhat of a throwback to the point guards of yesteryear. But the new thing that he brings to the game today is his dribbling style is so deceptive. He on a fast break, if anyone's trying to keep up with him, they don't know what he's going to do next, and he knows how to dribble the ball and rather score on a big man or draw the big man to him and pass it off to the center of the power forward. And so I would regard him as one of the top point guards in the NBA today.
You know what? It's your dime, and I appreciate your candidness, and I appreciate your honesty, and I have to totally agree with you in reference to both of those gentlemen. You know, that's a great call out with Mr. Barry from Chapel Hill. A lot of people may not remember, and I remember telling a good friend of mine that you know well, Victor Bullitt, when we were watching the game, I said, what Roy needs to do, they need to put the ball in Barry's hands and move. He was the point guard the year that they went to the national championship and lost to Villanova, and then they end up they put him on the wing, but they put Barry at the point, and because again Marcus Page was running the point, and when the Carolina first opened up, and I always thought he needed to go to 2 and put Barry at 1, and then you know what, you're exactly right, and then a year later. Now they're the defending national champion. So great call out. And in my opinion, the national championship tournament, it boils down to guard play. And if you got solid guards and guards taking care of business, you can go. Carolina is, to me, they're easy Sweet 16. And if they do the right thing, they can be an Elite 8. And unfortunately, their bigs are young. If their bigs were as solid as they were last year, they may be back in San Antonio for 3 straight national championships. And the same thing with Mr. Irvin. I kind of coined a phrase, if you will, from LeBron when he's saying that the kid, he's a remarkable player. Anytime that, a true guard can do what he does at his size, it's a remarkable feat. And you're so right. I mean, it just, people want to, they want to, talk about shooters, but if you do not have a guard, that person, that coach on the floor that can really run an offense, you will struggle as an individual. Even though somebody said, how do you struggle as an individual? If you're a post player, the guard can't feed you if the guard doesn't know what to do. If you're a wing, you can't do what you need to do. The guard doesn't know how to feed you. If you catch the ball, he penetrates. You need to relocate. And again, that's all comes from playing with one another. But that's what you get, folks, when you got a true point guard on your show. He's going to break it down. He's going to tell you exactly what needs to happen. So, and that on that same, I want to kind of stay on that same vein as we're talking about college basketball a little bit. What's your opinion about the one and dones? You think it should be a 2-year process, or are you satisfied with the one and dones? What's your opinion about that?
Well, there are always exceptions to the rule as it relates to those who are one and done, as also relates to those who just go straight into high school to the pros. You have your prototype like LeBron James, obviously, and other players that have done that in years past that have fared well. That should not be the norm, however. And those who go to college and show the promise of being a first-round draft pick, although that may be a high probability, you have to also factor in, are they capable of making the transition from being a young man to playing with men in the NBA? So it takes more than just raw talent to be able to hold your own. You have to be able to make the transition. And in my point of view, you're not going to find many young men that's going to come straight out of college the first year and just function in the NBA or even succeed for that matter. So what I'm saying is there are exceptions to the rule, but a prudent coach in college and also prudent parents with these kids are looking at the pros and the cons and not just looking at the dollars, because that could be so enamoring to the extent that a decision is made basically upon economics. And if they go to the NBA and not necessarily be ready, whether physically or as far as technique is concerned, then they could fail in that attempt and not have anything to fall back on. Now, again, there are exceptions to the rule, but it's something that should be carefully considered. And I don't see that happening these days. I see very few examples of young men coming out of college after the first year that I've seen evidence where they have carefully counted the costs and made a calculated decision and not just based upon, well, I'm good enough to get in. Yes, you may be good enough to get in, but you may not be good enough to be a mainstay. And again, you got an example like Kyrie Irving, who came out of Duke University and has done tremendously well. Well, he's definitely the exception to the rule. So it takes careful consideration. So I think that both the coaches for these universities and the parents of these kids need to really count the costs and consider the pros and cons and make a calculated decision. And I think that it will fare well for the person who's going from college to the NBA.
You know what, folks? You're hearing from Marion Williams right here on Basketball More in the Game. You're exactly right. You know what? And that's why he's on the show. So when y'all start hitting me up with some feedback, and you be like, Coach, man, where's this guy been, man? Why'd you wait 51 episodes to have him on? But that's all right. He's here today, and he's dropping these dimes just like a true point guard would be. I agree with you totally, my friend, because here's the deal from Coach's point is you can be a player, but can you transition to the league mentally, socially? Because to your point, now you're a kid. You're coming out as after a freshman. Now you're gonna be hanging out and the discipline. Do you go to practice? Do you go back to your room? How do you socially fit in with grown men? And when the game is over with, you're gonna say, "Hey kid, come on and go with me," or do you go back to your room? So. You know what? And here's another thing that really want the young folks to really dial in is, say Marion Williams is the number 1 draft pick this year, and he left the University of North Carolina after his freshman year. You know what? There's going to be somebody else coming out next year nipping at his heels. So every year you're going to have these guys 1, 2, and 3, and you're only looking at anywhere from a 12 to 13-man roster in the NBA. And to Marion's point, there's exceptions, Kyrie Irving, but then there's also guys that, you get in and within 2 or 3 years, they're not in the league anymore. They may be overseas playing. And versus if they would have stayed in school, matured a little bit more physically as well as mentally. So when they got in, they were a polished player, if you will. So therefore they have longevity in the league versus, you pick up a roster now and you go down through that. You may know 2 to 3 guys on the team. But the rest of the people, you're like, man, I have no idea who these guys are. because they're from schools that, they're not ACC schools, all of them. But in that, it's a financial thing. And just like, Marion was saying, you got to sit down and you got to count the costs and you got to make that calculated assessment, for what's best for you as an individual as well as your parents. And I know a lot of it is financial, but more importantly, it's, setting yourself up because, you have to prepare for after basketball. Because as I tell a lot of times, what are you going to do after cheering stops? Because once the cheering stops, it's going to be a little tough. So, hey, listen, I'm going to toss this up and then we get ready to move into the second portion of the podcast. Right now, it is mid-February. It's coming down the stretch of conference play in college basketball. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Give me your Final Four right. And if the Final Four was going on this weekend, who would be there?
I would go with Villanova. I'm going to give you a dark horse.
Okay.
Alabama.
Whoa, man. All right, I got that. I got that one. I'll start to say something, but I'm come back to that. I'm not going to interrupt you. You're on a roll.
Let's see.
Take your time. So he's got Alabama. He's got Villanova.
Arizona. And Virginia.
Oh wow, man! So he's got all tips of the globe on that. Now, you know what? It's funny when you said that. As soon as you said Alabama, I thought about one person, and that's Avery Johnson. And I'm like, you know what? That's a point guard looking out for a point guard. Ain't nothing wrong with that at all. as soon as you said Alabama, I was just like, that's a true point guard talking about that on the show today. But folks, you know what? Avery Johnson, he's doing great things. You know what? A lot of times, it takes a moment. For these programs to get to buy into a system. These coaches go in and their schools only want to give them 2 or 3 year contracts or 4 year contracts and expect these guys to to make miracles. And first of all, it's going to take you almost a year to build that relationship. But that's so you know what, we're gonna track that and we're gonna see what's going to happen. But that's a pretty good four. He pulled Virginia out, which is they super. Tony Bennett is super D. That's
absolutely.
They'll lock you down. They play super smart. They make sure that you don't. They limit your possessions, and when you go down and you start playing that crazy balls, I call it, and when I want to outscore Marion and Billy Ray wants to outscore all of us. We take bad shots. That plays right into Virginia's hands. So that's they will be a team to be reckoned with. Only unbalance for them is if they're ever behind when they have to score to get back up. If a team takes care of business, but just like the other night, they lost to Virginia Tech by 1 in overtime, and then Virginia Tech goes to Durham on Wednesday night, and they look hideous. I don't know what it was. I was kind of rushing in to get tuned up for a good ball game in Durham, and they laid an egg. But that's just the balance of the ACC. Kind of comes and goes. But great selection there, my friend. So let's recap that again. So it's Villanova, Alabama, Arizona, and UVA. So that's such an appropriate answer to give for a show that's based out of Virginia, and I'm only about 20 minutes away from Charlottesville. So definitely a great call out. In reference to that. So, hey, listen, we get ready to turn our attention to the next segment of the podcast, and this segment is entitled In the Paint, and it's sponsored by Act Sports. So for your recreation sports needs, reach out to Act Sports. Check them out. Check their website out at playactsports.com. They have rec basketball, travel basketball, volleyball, also travel volleyball. They have baseball, track and field, soccer, and flag football. And we definitely appreciate their continued support. So again, Play Act Sports. .com for your recreational sports need. They are, and I always refer to them as the 3D type organization. They're not just worried about the player, they're also worried about the heart behind that jersey. So great organization. So appreciate the continued support here on Basketball More in the Game. So, hey, in this segment there, Marion, we talk about in the paint. You know what? So we done brought it up nice and fast. So we're going to kind of go down into the big man land and dig down. And I know earlier before we came on the air, you were talking about your daughter, and she's in the D.C. area playing volleyball. And, you have a beautiful family. Been tracking you guys over the last few years. And just, if you don't mind, share a little bit about what you do when you're not on your day-to-day profession with the state of North Carolina in reference to your ministry as well as your involvement in your kids' dynamic lives.
Well, when I'm not working for the state government with the Department of Health and Human Services, I'm also a very doting husband and father. Been blessed to be married, be 25 years this coming June.
Amen.
And we have 3 beautiful daughters. My oldest daughter, named Joa, she's a student at UNC Pembroke, our alma mater. She's a junior majoring in psychology and minoring in art. So she's flowing in her gifts. And my middle child, Bethany, she's a junior in Eastern Wayne High School. She lettered in volleyball, and she has extremely excelled in the sport because she's now playing traveling volleyball with AAU, and as of right now, she has 3 schools that are scouting her: East Carolina University, South Carolina State University, and Livingstone College are currently vying for her. And so hopefully around this time next year, she would have signed a letter of intent. So that would be taken care of, and I'm really proud of having the athlete of the family. I didn't think that would materialize, but seeing that in my baby girl, it has showed me glimpses of when I was her age, and so I'm very thankful for that. Now, my youngest daughter is a student at our community college here in Wayne County. She's in a special program where she can work on her high school diploma and her associate in 4 years. So she's excelling academically. So right now, when I checked her grades this morning online, her GPA, believe it or not, Coach, is 4.3.
Oh man!
So she loves drama, and she plays in a lot of the musicals in our downtown theater here. So she's looking at going to school to study communications and minor in journalism. And so, other than raising our daughters, I'm also an associate pastor of my local church here in Goldsboro, North Carolina. The name of our church is Word of Truth Christian Fellowship. And as an assistant pastor, I understand my role in serving senior pastor in various capacities, whether it's counseling some of the members or officiating some services, and other things that brings responsibility to the ministry. I'm the go-to person in that regard. And so not only my hands are full with things to do, I'm fulfilled in what I'm accomplishing with the next goal that I'm seeking to do is to write a book.
Well, you know what? I tell you what, folks, when iron sharpens iron, and I knew back, years and years and years ago, and I say that, and it's not like I'm super old, but I knew, knowing this man for over 30 plus years, and what drove him when we were at the Pembroke State University, and just listen to what he just said, the academic success that his kids are having, and his wife and himself, just doing the work of the ministry, making a difference. And that's the same thing what we're doing here on the podcast, Basketball More in the Game, because, through basketball, it allowed me to know who Marion was, and it allowed me to see his passion, to see his drive. And then now that, he's, for me, I've retired, and, from the game of basketball, the only thing I do is watch it and talk about it, and and think about back in the day when we used to play. But, all of that hard work, and that's what it's about for you young folks that listen, is just Mr. Williams was capsing, just bringing it all under one roof, is his passion, his support of his children. As he said, he's at work and he's, hey, let me take a sneak peek, and heard that outstanding 4.3 GPA. And now his daughter's in D.C. at a tournament, and what he does at his church, and constantly think about, being an associate pastor is a dynamic role. There he is again in that leadership role, using those skills and talents that he's learned over the course of the year. And I know he's a dynamic speaker. Hadn't had opportunity to hear his message, but I've seen some of the stuff in action. And we'll look forward to one day being able to sit and listen to my great friend as he brings the word forth. Again, as he continues to again bless the folks of the church, and as well as the citizens and the surrounding areas of Goldsboro. I got to ask you a question. I know you're in Goldsboro. Have you ever ran across a guy named Anthony Tichy?
I know he used to play for Wake Forest.
Right. Yeah. And the reason why I bring that up, because he played at Wake Forest and he beat us. I was in the 8th grade and he played my high school. And I went back this past weekend home. I hadn't been home in a long time, but went home because my great nephew, it was his senior night, and I went back, and the place was, they wasn't even letting people in until after the girls' game, because it was just that many people. And the last time I saw that gym at that capacity is when Anthony Tichy was there, who was from Goldsboro. And I knew you live in Goldsboro, and I was just wondering had the paths crossed. So with that, folks, you know what? We have Marion Williams on, just talking about life, talking about the things that he's doing, the passion that he exudes as a husband, as a father, as an associate pastor, a true leader in every sense of the word. And that's what it's all about. When you stop and you look, each week what we try to do here on Basketball More in the Game is have a conversation, not an interview, a conversation with leaders that give you young players and coaches the ability to tune us in, dial us in, and hear. We're so excited that each and every week when we hear from our folks all around the country and all around the world, and just kind of toss it out from our listeners from Australia, Japan, United Kingdom, Finland, Germany, Netherlands, Canada, Dominican Republic, New Zealand, Albania, Germany, Kuwait, Tunisia, Vietnam, and Ghana. So all of you countries, we certainly appreciate your continued support. Let it flow. We definitely want you to give us some great feedback from a great friend that we've had on the show. So listen, as we start to wind this down, I've got to ask you this question. If you don't mind, talk about work-life balance. You're involved, with your daughters and what they're doing academically, as well as in the sports world. You're also associate minister. You do have a full-time job. So in that whole entire capacity, talk about work-life balance, if you don't mind.
Well, first of all, it is definitely a need to establish a balance between your work life, your family life, and other entities that you do in life. So many times I've seen, particularly pastors, for instance, they become so involved with pastoring that they forget that their first responsibility is to be the minister of your home. The Bible says that charity starts at home, charity being love and spread abroad. And sometimes in instances where pastors become so committed to the ministry, which is nothing wrong with that they lose sight of the responsibilities right up under their nose. And so having seen that growing up and becoming a pastor, it has really conditioned and disciplined me to make first thing first. And so taking care of my family is my first ministry. And once I have established that, when it comes to other things in my life, other factions in my life, such as my job and what I do around the community, I prioritize what's important and what is not as important. And again, I've learned how to keep first things first. Now, as an associate pastor, I receive telephone calls. I receive requests for counseling sessions, and I'm my pastor's right-hand man. But what I love about my relationship with my pastor is he recognizes who I am. And see, there's a difference between who you are and what you are. Who you are is what you will always be. What you are is what you are doing temporarily.
Wow.
What I do on my job is what I do. But who I am as a father, that'll never change.
Right.
And people tend to misconstrue what that is all about. And I was fortunate enough to learn that early in my adult life. So by the time I became married and became a pastor, that helped me put things in its proper perspective.
You know what, folks? So there you have it right there. None other than Mr. Marion Williams, associate pastor, father, husband, a true leader for the great state of North Carolina, as well as the citizens that he serves in the Goldsboro area. So as we start winding this thing up, first of all, again, we just want to give honor where honor's due. And we just want to thank Marion for taking time out and just sharing, from his heart, his passion about his family, his job, the love of Christ that he has, and what makes Marion run every day, what motivates him every day, and we just thank him for that. So before we close, I want to just toss it over to you, my friend, for your closing comments.
Well, first I'd like to thank you, Coach Goins, for the opportunity to speak on this venue. I consider this an honor and a privilege because it is awesome to see the manifestation of what you have put together, that you have come to realization of your vision of what you want to accomplish. And this is the perfect venue that speaks of your personality, and it speaks of who you are as a coach and as a person. And I just want to speak to that young basketball player who wants to succeed. Make sure you put first things first. As relates to basketball, you stay in the condition that you need to stay in, that your coach has asked you to do. If you know you can't dribble with your left hand, learn how to dribble. And then make sure that you attend to the academics, to whatever school that you're in. Academics allows you to elevation in life. And you cannot do one without the other. So make first thing first with academics. And then as you succeed in life, you put family first. The family that you are connected with now, which is obviously your nuclear family. But when you get your own family, never forget the family must be attended to first. And as you prioritize things in life in that manner, you will always be successful. It doesn't mean that you won't go through any problems, because you will have problems. But because you learn how to put first thing first, you become a problem solver. You become a problem overcomer. And once you will overcome one problem, when something else comes up, you can overcome that as well. And then you teach that to other people. So, again, Coach Goins, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about basketball, about life, and about success. And I wish nothing but success to your hands, to what you do going forward.
You know what, folks, and I certainly appreciate you, my friend. It's as I sit here and as you were talking about that, being an overcomer, and actually on the radio show on Saturday morning that I'm on with Ralph Sampson, Out of Bounds. That's what I speak about this week. I do a tip of the week, and this week tip of the week is being an overcomer. So iron sharpens iron, and here is Mr. Marion Williams dropping down on right at the end of the show. For you young guys as you continue to roll on. So, hey, listen, reach out, let us know, give us some feedback as we continue to move forward and make a difference in everybody's life. So, listen, we got to get up out of here. I got to get down here and get this gym cleaned up. So, listen, like it always says, what we want to make sure that you give back, do the best that you can do. And always, trust in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So, listen, I'm your host, Coach Goins. Until next time, I'll see you in the gym.